Hello and welcome to day 18. Today we are going to paint this Nutcracker. This is a rough draft that I kind of ran through really quickly just to see how I wanted to paint it. I've never done a Nutcracker before and I wasn't sure the best way to approach it. We could do a sketch. However, I feel like that might be difficult for some of you, especially if you're not one who typically draws, unless I had a way to link to a downloadable sketch, which is something I might look into doing eventually, especially with my type of paintings where I paint realistic and style. I do use a lot of outlines. I sketch my outlines, I print them, I trace them onto my paper. But for this, I thought it might be easier to just kind of go for it, pick a spot and kind of work our way around the painting. It's not going to be perfect, but it might be a little more loose this way. And just give us a chance to kind of experiment. And so we may run out of room. It's tricky sometimes in guessing. I did actually a decent job on this one, getting it to fit in my space of paper. Sometimes when I work on a sketch, I run out of room quickly, which is why I now sketch on my iPad so that I can adjust things as needed before putting it on the paper. But we are just going to go for it, I think, because that overall turned out decent without having a sketch. And I figured it might be just the easiest. So we're just going to kind of focus on shapes of things. And so when I did this, I started with the face. And I think that's a good place to start. I just did the shape of the face. I mixed a tiny bit of pink, this Quinacridone rose, and then a little bit of yellow. Probably more pink than yellow, and then I added some water because I want it to be more skin tone, a really, really light color, almost white, but it's going to be slightly darker than our white. Okay. And something I didn't do on this, but I would, is we can use bleed proof white to add in some more whites because the teeth and around the eye and stuff are going to be white. Okay, so we're going to kind of eyeball our paper. We want to leave enough room for the crown. So I'm just going to start right around here. I'm going to make that mark for where the top of his crown is going to go. And then it kind of just curves out. And then it's kind of flat down here at the bottom. So it's just round in there, flat down at the bottom, and then kind of a rounded edge here. We have hair on this side, which we just kind of leave blank for now and we'll add to later. Okay, so there's his face. It's a bit darker than my original one. I also did originally try to do a sketch on this and I wasn't loving it, and so I've erased a bit, and so some of my paper is a little probably angry at me for erasing. Sorry, I have like a loose hair on here that is bugging me, but I don't want to touch the paint too much because it'll spread the paint. We're just gonna let it dry. It'll come up when it's dry. Okay, so we have a little bit of a head shape there. The next thing we need to do is get the gold bits in right under his head there for like his shoulder area. And I'm just looking at the picture and seeing like he's got a shoulder that kind of sticks out off to the side. Just a little mini rectangle there. And then he's got this one up front. I leave a space for his teeth. And then we've got this front part of his suit. And then another shoulder over here. Let's see, right now we're just adding in the shapes of the things. We're not going too in-depth, too detailed. We are having to move from one shape to another pretty close to each other, which is not how I typically work. We're going to go to the green now. We're going to do a green arm over here. Try not to touch the gold. Just get really close. And his arm goes down a bit. And then it kind of folds here because his arm is like folded. And so it goes at kind of an angle where his other part of his arm is going to be sticking up. And we're going to leave that there. There's a bit of a space here. It's for the red and for his beard. So he's got a beard here and some red. I'm going to skip some space there for the red And then I'm gonna create a little strip here for the green. And the green goes all along up here, but he's got beard in there, so I can't fill it all in. And that's the hardest part, is trying to be aware of what's going there and leaving it. If you cover it, we can use bleed proof white to add the beard back in later, so it's not a big deal. Then over here we've got another space for that red, so we're gonna skip over it. We've got a little bit of his side here that's green. And then we've got his arm, which is connected to that little shoulder bit. And his arm goes down a bit further. The green of his arm goes down a bit further than where his wet belt is. So we'll add that in there. Okay. The next part is under his belt here. We have his little, kind of almost like, it looks like a skirt, but it's just the rest of his coat. But the belt makes it kind of like poof out like a little skirt. And so I'm gonna go over here under that little bit of red, and I'm gonna do this bit of the skirt. I know it's not a skirt, but I just can't call it anything else. That's what it makes me think of, is a little skirt. But it's got a lovely little triangle up the front there that's going to be red, but the rest of this is green. So I'm going to fill that in with some green that's going to go down here all the way past where his arm will be. And we're just getting in some of those shapes in colors. I'm gonna go ahead so I don't get confused in what I'm working on, and I'm gonna add in the reds and leave some space like this. There's a gold outline there. There's actually 3 gold buttons on this as well, which I'm gonna try to avoid as I fill that in a little bit. I'm gonna draw them in, and then I'm gonna fill in that area around it. And so these, we're just getting a base color. We can always go in later and add more details to our little Nutcracker guy. We just want to kind of get it situated. Have all the shapes marked off. We're also going to have a little bit of red up in here above his beard, and then down here below his beard. And that one actually probably should have had a little circle there as well, so we'll have to work on that. And then down here, there's a strip of gold above the triangle, or yeah, this little triangle section. And so I'm gonna leave that and kind of fill in the rest of this, eyeballing that shape. And again, it's okay if it's not perfect. Now we want to add in the gold of his hands, his arms. And so there's a little bit on this side that goes out. His hand is sticking up. And then we have it over here. like that. And then we're going to get a bit more of that skin tone color and carefully do his hands, just little round shapes right at the base of those gold bits that I added. Okay. Yeah. Then we need to add in his legs, which are red. His pants, we're going to go halfway down to about his knee. I'm going to start on this side. His leg doesn't go all the way across. It starts partway over there. Okay, full disclosure, the setup might look a little different. Things have probably jumped. My husband walked in when I was in the middle of filming last time, and this house, I don't have a door in my art room, and it's very, very loud, and my family's just not used to me filming because this is new to me. So I had to pause the video and stop, and then I haven't had time to myself in a few days. So it's only been a few seconds for you guys, but it's been a few days for me, and I can't remember everything that I said or did before, and so we're just gonna kind of try to jump back in. I'm gonna see if I can save this because I literally had to stop filming immediately once I realized it was getting too loud, and I didn't want to make adjustments off camera. So I have not touched this, and so it'll probably leave a bit of a line, but I'm hoping I can kind of show you a little bit of how to work with that, maybe give you a little tips as I try to figure out how to kind of blend that out evenly with the other part of his leg, and go from there. I considered starting over and refilming, but we're already halfway through and I just really don't want to have to start over. I have a lot of other videos to film for the series, and so we're just gonna go for it and see what happens. If it doesn't go well, you'll never know because I'll refilm. But for now, we're just gonna jump back in. I couldn't tell you what I was saying last time, but we're gonna finish that leg, try to fix it. I'm trying to see my my sketch is very light, and so I'm kind of just having to guess about where I want his legs to go. We're gonna go right about here. Okay, and I am for now kind of covering, I'm just gonna repaint that whole leg. I know it'll be different, it's gonna be darker in the areas that already had a layer, but once it dries, I can see how it's looking and go from there as far as deciding what we're gonna do to change it. And so from now, I'm just gonna go ahead with this other leg to about the same area. All right. We're gonna leave some space, and then I think I'm gonna go ahead and try to do his boots and maybe even his belt. Actually, before I do his belt, let's do this little square on his belt where the gold is gonna be, because that's one of those things that's gonna be really hard to kind of work around. So it's better to just mark it now, and then we can go around it with our black when we're painting that in. It'll be a little bit easier. I think with something small like that, it's kind of hard to just avoid that small of an area. But hopefully we can make that work. We might just have to layer up and just make our reds a lot darker than this one here, which is not a problem. I'm okay making it darker. You know what, maybe we'll come back and do his legs in a bit. The rest of his legs, his boots. And let's just do his little crown. It could be fun. I'll use my round 4 Princeton. It needs to be like a fine point, but not as fine as that necessarily, unless you want to be more fine. You do have more control with the smaller brush, but you can cover, you know, slightly bigger areas with a bigger brush. And I'm just going to kind of fill in a little curved area here of the base of the crown. And then there's actually an area where it's a little bit lighter, so you kind of skip a space. And we'll fill that in here in a minute. We'll pull the paint down. But we're just going to go ahead and do this, the top of the crown. And I am not going around the red. The red will be dark enough that it can go on top of the gold. So I'm just filling it all in. It's not perfect, but that is okay. This is one of those areas where I struggle with. This is a more illustrative painting, which isn't typically my forte, but it's not bad. We're making it work. We're making it work. Yeah. I do have some areas like on here on his coat, he should have had some gold buttons, but I didn't really include those, and maybe I just won't. We're getting creative, doing our own thing. We can just decide that we're not going to have those. I do need to do some hair, and his hair is white. We're just going to use a little bit of the gray to kind of sketch kind of some strands in between there, kind of some shadows. We don't want to fill in all the hair. That'll make his hair be gray. We really want it to be more of that white. And we want it on both sides. Actually, this one, there's not as much on that side because he's kind of turned. As you can see on this one, it's kind of hard to tell, but he's turned at a slight angle. I keep having to move him though because I need my paints. And we can use some bleed proof white later if we want to make this a little more white. While we're doing that, we can also, it looks like I think we may have done a little bit of shadows on the beard. I can't remember. I could have looked back at the video, but I didn't. I thought it would be more fun to just jump in. Maybe not as well planned. You can already see as this is drying, it's a lot darker there. And when we do another layer, we can try to do another layer here and then just try to go only where we didn't paint before. But there is also some shadows that we can add. I didn't add them on this guy because it was just a kind of a rough sketch, which will kind of even that out a little bit. It is darker up near the top of his leg. Oh, excuse me. Oh, my apologies. Whew. That snuck up on me. So we'll play around with that here in a minute. For now, I think this part is dry enough that we can do our gold little sections here where the pants meet the boots. I'm actually not even sure if that's like part of the boot, part of the pants. It's hard to tell. All I know is it's on there, and so we're painting it. It looks nice too, so we could always choose to leave it out, but it looks nice there. I like the little gold accents. So, yeah, so we'll leave that, and then we have, that is supposed to be these that look like they touched when I first painted them, and so they're a bit, blendy. So I'm just touching up all the gold parts that I had already painted before, just because they look like they may have bumped other colors and blended a bit with them, and they're not as bright, I guess you could say. Okay. Now if we want, we can work on this little scepter thing that he has. While we wait for that to dry before we do the belts. So we can say like it goes right around here. Nice little line. And then another line. The hard part about this is you gotta try to do it all in kind of one go and get down to the bottom where his feet are. And it looks a little funny right now because we don't have the rest of his feet, but it'll make sense and fit in a bit when we do. And now I'm just going to build up the base of this. So we've got one nice little bottom layer here. Then there's a little bit that sticks out, a little ball. And we can go through and add shadows and separate things after we get the base in there. We've got a lovely little ring. And we could probably do this in separate sections, like let each one dry in between two. But I think for now we're getting the basic shape down just by filling it all in now. And it just gives us something to do rather than waiting for it to dry. And I don't think it's going to make a big enough difference if we had waited. And we got a little section here, and then it's going to go up into kind of a point. We've got this little tall section here, and then we've got the point. There we go. And so we can go through and add shadows and stuff as that dries to separate each of the different sections. But for now, that works. So yeah, main things we still have to do. We have a little bit of this lighter gold area here, which I will get some gold. I'm just going to add some more water to it so that it's a lighter color. And I will go ahead and add that in there. It's just a more highlighted section of the crown. And then we can go ahead and mix in our black. Or if you have a black, you're welcome to just use that. I'm just going to mix my Sepia and my Sodalite Genuine, which usually gives me a decent enough black. And it has a decent enough, it has a hint of color to it that just makes it interesting. I think it's kind of nice to mix a black. I know there are other ways. I'm trying to make it a simple way to mix a black if you're mixing one. But there are other ways to do it. And so we're gonna do the belt first, which I guess I never really actually did on that one anyway. But we've got this section here. We're gonna try to go in between there. Let that gold part stay out. And it's gonna kind of blend in, like it's really hard to see the gold now. But if we wanna use some glitter paint for the gold accents, we can do that too, and that'll make that pop a bit more, I think. So for now, it's just a little blended in there. And then we can do our boots. I'm going to use the black. I'm going to use a slightly bigger brush. That fine liner is a little too fine. I think for me, I'm just going to go, oops, right up to the edge there. Bring it down. And then, let's see. I'm going to add in a little curved section there for the boot. And then we have this one. Okay. And it kind of separates a bit. You can see some of the blues in there, which is kind of one of the fun things about having mixing a blue or black. As you can see some of those other colors in it too. Okay, there we go. It's not perfect, but it's there. The only other blacks and stuff that we have is in the face, which we will do here in a minute. Unless you want yours to be faceless. It can be scary to add the face. I don't blame you if you would rather not. I did notice we forgot the gold here on this section. So I'm going to quickly add that. Okay. And then we have just a tiny section up top on his crown thing. Do some red up there and then a tiny point on top. And then we can work on his face and call him done. I still got to touch up his legs. And then, yeah, we'll just do any last minute details we want to add into, we can do then. And I will go ahead and use some more of that red to add to these little red jewels that hang off the crown. There we go. It gives a nice little three-dimensional look. And because I left spaces for them, we also have, these are gold. Oops, I made that really dark gold. So, and then there's actually one technically here that isn't covered by his beard that I did not leave space for, and I just kind of squeezed in. So we'll see how it turns out. I went a little too dark on the color there, but I'm going to cover these with a gold in a bit, and so I think that will help. Okay, so for his face, his teeth, it's kind of hard to tell on here, but the bottom is surrounded in gold, and it's got the separators for the teeth, and then there's the red with the teeth. And then, so the bottom one that's in gold is actually in line with like his shoulder pads and stuff. It's right here. And so I'm just gonna sketch that in. And then I'm gonna add in the one above where his teeth go in the red. Okay, there's his mouth. Now at the beginning I did kind of sketch his face, but I'm going to be honest, I can't really see my sketch. It kind of got covered. So we're just going to kind of have to go for it and see what happens. I have the skin color that I made earlier, and it's a little bit, I have a slightly darker version here, and that's what I'm going to use for this shadow of his nose bit here. And yeah, I'm just going to kind of sketch that in. And then there's a little bit over here. And hopefully that gives it a kind of look that his nose is sticking out a bit. We'll go ahead and go to the black and try to sketch his eyebrows and mustache. I'm going to start with his mustache just because that's easier. It's already, like, there's a space right there between the nose and the teeth. And I'm just going to take a nice big swoop out there. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side, except I'm going to have it kind of go a little bit smaller because we can't see that full side of the mouth. Because he's partially turned away from us. And I'm just thickening that one up a little bit too because I want it to be just a bit bigger. So now when we go up here and we do his eyebrows, we want them to be similar, but maybe a little bit smaller. Oops. My brush kind of separated a bit, which was not helpful. I'm just kind of going for it. I mess up, I really can't do a whole lot about it. So get a little more of the freshly made black. We need to make a quick little line for his eyes. He had just like a line above his eye, so kind of like just one straight line, and then his eye is more defined by the white area that we'll have to use bleed proof white for. There's also a lovely little black pupil, barely any there, hard to see. That one's much smaller because it's further away. I mean, really, I think it looks kind of good without even having to do any of that. We could just not add the color of his eye or the white, and he is still giving us the impression of a face. So it's kind of personal preference how you go about that part. Before we add any other colors, we want to make sure that stuff is dry. So I'm going to come and do just a few shadows and things. And so on his leg, what we could do, like I said, is darken this one because that one's already got 2 layers. So we'll do 2 layers on this leg. And then I'm going to do another layer down here where it was separate. Now it might still have a line there, but that's okay. We're going to do a shadow here in a minute anyway. But that should even out the color part at least a little bit. Now, while we're waiting to add shadow there, we can add some shadows to some of these other areas if you want to make it look a little more three-dimensional, realistic looking. His hands have shadows on the underside in like a brownish color. So that gives it a little three-dimensionality. You can use the same kind of sepia brown color for a shadow on the gold, especially here. There's a little bit of a shadow because that's where it sits on the face, and then there's some little like swirly bits in here, and each of these little sections has a bit of a shadow, and you can just use your fine liner brush to kind of add some shadow in there to create some form for those. You can add highlights as well later just to make those look a little more three-dimensional. This we can create a shadow along the arm here to make it look like it's sticking out toward us a little bit more. It's a little darker on this side in here. You can even add like a little shadow there. Touch a shadow there. For the boot, you really just need a highlight. Yeah, most of that is not too bad. I will say we probably can use some bleed-proof white to make our teeth a little more, stand out a little bit more, but honestly I think it looks enough like teeth. It gives that impression that it's not that big of a deal. We can take some blue if we want our little guy here to be a blue-eyed. You can use any other color if you'd rather it be a different color. But the one that the reference photo has him being blue-eyed. And I think that looks nice. And then we can add bleed-proof white for any highlights that we want to add. And for these shadows on his pants, this is the red that I had mixed before. I don't know if it was on this tutorial or a different one, But it's red mixed with a little bit of perylene green because they're complements, and it just mutes it a little bit, and it makes a really good shadow color. And so then tap and spread it out. And just you lose a little bit of the color, and it just spreads out a little bit better. And then putting a little bit of here, same thing, not as much of a shadow, but you pull it down, and it just gives that three-dimensionality a little bit more. Makes it a little more three-dimensional. And then even the black doesn't really have a whole lot to it, but you can add areas that are darker here as well. And then highlight will make it shine. But really, the final thing we really need to do is the bleed proof white, and then if you wanted to use some glitter paint to just make your Nutcracker sparkle in certain areas, you can. Just add a really tiny dot, maybe a little line down here as a highlight. Just a few areas. I mean, he's shiny all over, so a few more highlights in other areas that you normally probably wouldn't, but because it's a Nutcracker, we can. We have some on here. Obviously up here, I told you that was kind of a highlight, and so we can add some there. Just, yeah, adding in some white streaks here and there will give that reflective bit. And actually, I forgot on the first one, there is another reference photo. If you really want to, you can add that. There's a little gold ball on the top of his crown. Okay. So there's the Nutcracker. If you wanted to add color, like shimmer, like I said, I've got this Lissy Linka brand glitter watercolor, which is fun to add those highlights. And actually, I have these ones, which are really, really nice, but I actually prefer for this one, this other set that I have. I believe it was an autumn set, and I really like this gold better for the colors that we used. And you could even add some sparkle on other parts of your Nutcracker if you wanted. But this might make like those buttons pop really nicely. His belt. I do typically use a different water jar for when I'm adding glitter, because the glitter will get in there. And then when you rinse, you might add some glitter to your other paints. just something to be mindful of. And there's lots of different companies out there with glitter watercolor. Some are better than others, I think. I mean, I really like this one. She's located, I think, in Germany, and so shipping might be something to consider if that's an issue for you. But they are very shimmery, which I like. So, and then yeah, on this one. And you could do it all over. You could just do it in certain spots. It's entirely up to you. And like I said, you don't have to do glitter at all. Some people do not like glitter. And if you're making, like, if you were painting your own thing and you were wanting to make prints of them, when you scan it, the glitter will not translate. So just something to be aware of. If I make prints of my art that has glitter in it, I am typically prepared to print it on watercolor paper and add the glitter back in. But there we go. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that didn't end up being too long with the two separate videos. or confusing, and I apologize if it was. And I hope to see you tomorrow for day 19. Thanks. Bye, y'all.